At a summit meeting in Paris in December 1974, my colleagues, heads of government, asked me to write a report on the European Union and to define in that report what the European Union means to us. When I started writing the report, I had at my disposal 3 reports made by the European institutions, by Parliament, by the Commission and by the Court of Justice. But other extremely interesting reports existed already, and between them there were excellent reports such as that written by the former Prime Minister Mr. Werner on the Economic and Monetary Union, the report written by the French expert Professor Vidal, the report written by a Dutch commission headed by Mr. Sperenberg, and other ones. And my colleagues asked me also to visit the different capitals of the member states and to have conversations with the living forces of their countries, with political leaders, leaders of trade unions, of employers' organizations, of farmers' organizations, of women's organizations, and so on. When visiting the different capitals, I found a very special state of mind. Public opinion has no view on the future of their own country if there is not finally a European integration, a European construction. But at the same time, public opinion thinks that there is a complete lack of political will for the moment to realize that European integration. I told my colleagues what feelings I found in the different capitals of the member states and what the public opinion in their own state is thinking of the future of Europe. I think that when writing my report, I had to define the European Union. What does that mean? In my eyes, it's not the final phase of the European development, but it's an extremely interesting and important one. I am a prime minister. That means that I must take into account political reality and that I must make proposals which we can realize. So I think that we must try to realize a change in quality in what exists in Europe. We must start from what exists already and what is already accepted by parliaments and by public opinion. But from that basis, we must develop Europe. And when developing it, we must have in mind what the objectives of our action are for the moment and what concrete measures in order to improve the existing situation we can propose and accept now in these circumstances. This is what I did in my report. So I had to propose some of the final targets, of the goals, of the objectives. What do we want to realize with Europe? Second, I had to propose what we want to do in the field of the external relations. All the people I met asked me why we don't speak in world politics with one voice. And when I say world politics or external relations, I mean everything that is concerned by that activity, even the problems of security. I'm making a difference, a distinction between defense policy and security policy, but I'm speaking in my report of Europe and its own security. We must have common policies, that's clear, industrial ones and agricultural ones. We must have the courage to say how these policies can be developed and what other policies we have to accept now in order to reach the objective we are proposing ourselves for the future. We must have an idea of what we can do together in the field of economic and monetary policy. It's an extremely delicate and difficult task to make proposals in that field, not only in itself, but because we know all that very hard economic crisis in our countries. Well, I think I found a new approach of the problem, and I think that we can use the snake and the members of the snake in order to develop not a complete common policy, but a better policy, and that we can find the basis in order to develop in future a common economic and monetary policy within the framework of the community or of the European Union. That's what I am proposing in my report. We must have an idea of society, the society we want to develop when we are integrating Europe. I am describing that society in a certain way also. And I am speaking of the European citizens. We are not making Europe for the pleasure of the technocrats or for the pleasure of making new constructions. We are doing it for the benefit of the people living in our member states, living in Europe. I am speaking of the rights in the plural of the citizens and what we can do for them with concrete measures. And finally, there is the problem of the institutions. How can we improve the working of the institutions? How can we strengthen the institutions? Because if they are working in a good way, they can develop a new dynamism so that heads of government have not to describe in details what we want to do. The institutions must develop by their own what we have to do in future. Well, I think that everybody accepts now, more or less, the idea of having direct elections for the European Parliament. I'm speaking of that problem in my report also, and of the task, the new task of the European Council, that means the former summit conferences. I'm making proposals for the Commission in order to have a better working of the Commission, and I am speaking of a kind of delegation of competences for the Council of Ministers and for the Commission. I think that are interesting ideas we can discuss, we can develop in future. The most interesting thing is that these ideas now are formulated. I propose them to my colleagues, and we can open with this report a great debate on the future of Europe. And I think this will be an interesting operation because public opinion will know what we are proposing, and in all the member states we can start with a discussion now about the future of Europe. And that in itself will be a very good thing, I think.